Hi friends, welcome back to Vectorworks. We are now going to talk about drawing navigation. So that's going to be the topic of this video, and you can use the information in this video to complete the questions or to help you find the information that you need for the drafting scavenger hunt, right? So this is another scavenger hunt assignment. I know you guys have probably done one of these with me before, but in this case, it'll be about navigating through this software package, okay, instead of whatever, printed out package, right? So we're going to open up the file in Vectorworks and learn where everything is living in there, okay? So the first thing you'll do is download a copy of this file, which has the date 01/14/20, which was the last time I revised it, Lysistrata, the name of the show, and then Vectorworks 2021, because that's the version that this was saved as. So this will be the 2021 edition, which we are all using this semester, hopefully. Okay, so file is opened up. Again, I'm in that custom Spotlight workspace, so that's why the panes are where they are. And I'm going to just give you a quick tour of the interface. So all of these different panels are called palettes, right? And we touched on that a little bit in the last video, because if you lose them, they're over here if you want them back. So now I'm going to really quickly just run through what each of these palettes are so that you vaguely know, right? This is all pretty obvious. These are your basic drawing tools. So I want to draw rectangles and rounded rectangles and whatever. Those are all over here. The next category is these tool sets, and those are organized by these little buttons at the bottom into various categories with little icons to help you figure out which one they are. So I'm looking for lighting instruments. Great, I'll go here to the light. I'm looking for walls and doors and whatnot. I'll go here to the building shell. Okay, so that is that set of things. This little panel is your attributes, and so attributes are the properties of anything that is selected, and if nothing is selected, then they are the properties of anything new that you draw, right? So this is, say I'm drawing with a black pen with a white fill if I draw something new right now. Down here is snapping, which is just the way that objects snap to each other within the Vectorworks file. So you can change those settings, but I usually just keep these ones that are shown as my defaults, unless they're causing a problem for me. Here's a top view of my drawing. You'll see over here is object info. Nothing is showing up in there, and that's because nothing is selected, right? If I select an object, then I'll start getting info about that object. And depending on what kind of object, it'll have different attributes attached to it, okay? So if I select like this footlight ring, or I select this boxcar, right? All of that stuff has attached information over here, and that's all given in that object info panel. There are a couple of different tabs. There's a data tab, there's also a render tab, and that allows you to adjust how it will look in a 3D rendering, okay? So now let's look down here at the navigation panel, and this is one that we're going to use a lot because this is how we get around from thing to thing, from layer to layer or sheet to sheet within the drafting package, okay? So the first little tab over here is the classes panel, right? And classes are like different pens. There are layers and layers of organizational available in classes. So that's all over there. And this is a file that I imported into my software. So it has a bunch of things that are classed that someone else put and organized in. And then I have my additional classes that I added. So that's just a more finely tuned way of categorizing objects or classes. You can use classes to control things like line weight and color. All of that stuff can be controlled by class. So if you have a bunch of objects that are of the same type, and you might want to globally change their line weight, the class would be a way to do that. The next one, and this is where I usually live in my panel over here. The next tab is the design layers, and it looks like three pieces of paper sort of floating in stacks, right? Design layers are a stacking order thing. So they're kind of like individual sheets of vellum. So you stack the bottom one and then the next one sits on top of it and the next one sits on top of it. That's super helpful if you're like a lighting designer because you want to put the scenery underneath the lights and you want the lights to be on top. In your template, you'll see there are certain layers that are already given, right, in this design layer thing, right? So there's a floor and a theater floor plan and scenery and soft goods, and this is sort of going up from the bottom to the top, okay? These are all 3D layers, okay? So in this particular case, we're looking at the top of a model view right now. So if I hit Shift-C, welcome to keyboard shortcuts, which is now going to be part of your life. That puts me into my flyover tool over here, right? Shift-C. And then I can click and drag and see this in 3 dimensions, okay? So we're in 3D, we can look around, I can move it around and see how the set looks from different perspectives, okay? The keyboard shortcut to get back to where we were is Command 5. That takes us back to top plan view, okay? And there are a bunch of different views. I'll talk about those in a second. But this is the key piece of information about this design layers organization is that these are all 3D layers, okay? So these are 3D objects that stack on top of each other. The stacking happens more in the 2D view, but in general, that's the way to think about it, okay? You can change the stacking order by grabbing something from its little number and dragging it up and down, and that'll move it around in the stacking order, okay? So those are design layers, and this is where we draft. The next tab over, these are your sheet layers, and sheet layers are like pieces of paper for printing out, okay? And one of the cool things about Vectorworks is it allows you to do your plate, right? And this is what we did in hand drafting, where we plated things. So it allows you to take a snapshot from a specific perspective called a viewport and put that onto a sheet of paper and then annotate it on that sheet of paper, right? So let's take a look by double clicking on it at the ground plan layer, right? So now the little check mark's over here, and all of a sudden I'm on a piece of paper now instead of in a big void, right? And if I zoom in, this is a viewport, which is just a top view snapshot of this thing. And then it has all of these labels and text written in and all of that kind of stuff, yes. And those are currently unlinked because it is a thing from the past and I haven't updated it to use the linking properties of these labels that now exist, which is a cool thing we'll get to in a bit. But in general, this is my ground plan labeled with notes and all of that kind of stuff. Some rough dimensions that are helpful, but in general, ground plan view, right? Has a title block, has a little section marker. That section marker links to the section view here on the second plate, and then I can just click my way through and see each of my drafted plates, okay? And then this is like a lovely scene by scene, right? So this is tiny, like mini versions of where the scenery would be and then renderings to show what that would look like, okay? So that's all in our sheet layers. They did do a nice thing in Vectorworks in, I don't know if it was in 2020 or in this 2021 version, and that was that they combined. So you get this information about where you are here in this navigation panel, right? Wherever the check mark is what you're looking at right now. But you also have it up here with this little switchy layery tool, right? And right next to that picture, you can jump from sheet layer to sheet layer or to design layer. And this allows you a quicker way to access those two types of content, right? So you can more quickly be like, oh, I actually want to go look at scene 2 on 8.5 by 11, or I want to go look at the scenery ground plan layer. And that it shows you what you're in right now, lets you jump between them, okay? So again, as you look across here, these are replicated, right? This is the classes tool, links up here, this is the layers, and this is the layer that you're on, right? This is the active class that you're currently drawing in. And then we have a couple other things up here that I'll get to in a second. Okay. So now we know we have design layers, we have sheet layers. The next tab over is viewports, and these are all snapshots. I don't use this tab a whole lot in my navigation window, but it does exist, right? The one after that is called saved views, and this is really lovely. It's a useful thing for me because in this case with this set, I have scenery that's in different places depending on what scene I'm in, and I can now quickly choose which view, right? And it's moving around the scenery as I go. And that's based on which classes are visible, okay? So I organized these pieces of scenery. They're repeated in different classes. And then I use these save views to jump from one snapshot to another as I work through my drawing, right? So it turns on some classes and turns off others. You'll see it's this eyeball picture here. It's also right here in this drop-down menu where you can quickly jump from view to view. Now, these bottom ones are just the scene by scenes, right? And those are all top view, and you'll see that over here as well. It looks like a piece of paper. These three are actually saved views from three-dimensional vantage points, right? So if I want to go to the center stage viewport, this is what it looks like, right? It's now quickly rendering it all up into OpenGL. So I can look at it at this perspective. So this can be helpful if I'm doing presentation or something like that, and I want to be able to jump into the middle of the model and move around as if I'm inside it, right? This is what it looked like from the entrance door, right? Or here's what it looks like from center of the house, okay? So those are other views that I can save if there's something I want to be able to get back to pretty easily. So that's your saved views. And then this last one is references, and we won't talk too much about this until we get all the way up to the lighting section of the class. References allows you to bring in things from other drawings and link them to those other drawings so that if that other drawing gets updated, it'll update into your drawing. So that's a really helpful tool that Vectorworks has for collaboration. But for now, we're going to not worry about references, okay? So that should give you a pretty good start in terms of getting around the drawing, right? If you get lost, right? If you're like, I am in space, I don't know where I am, what happened, right? That Command 5 brings you back to top plan view, right? And then you can either choose this fit to page area or fit to objects mode, and it will zoom you to wherever your drawing is, okay? And that can be helpful if you get yourself lost, right? You'll notice, I'm gonna just go quickly across these. You have like zooming options. To move around, I usually use the scroll wheel to zoom in and out, right? And then if you click and hold with the scroll wheel, you can actually drag, right? It turns your cursor into the hand tool, which lets you move the drawing around, right? So I can zoom in, and then I can click with my middle mouse button with my scrolly wheel and move my drawing around. So that's a really helpful trick in drawing navigation, right? So as I get stuck, I can move around, and then I can zoom back out with my scroll wheel. You can also select things, zoom to a selection. So if I select this and then I hit that zoom button, it'll zoom to whatever is selected here, right? Fit to objects. It's going to fit to whatever that object is. If I have nothing selected, it'll fit everything in the drawing on the screen. So that can be really helpful for you as well. So we talked a little bit about the zoom. This is the working plane and the active layer plane. And I'll talk about that more when we're actually drawing stuff, but that's what those two buttons are. This here is your current view, okay? So this basically lets you jump from view to view of a 3D model in your design layers. So right now I'm in top plan view, which means that it is using specific styles related to plan view, right? So in this case, it means that we're seeing these diagonal lines in the walls. We're seeing standard doors and that kind of stuff because we're in our top plan. You can also look at things in top view, and now we're actually just looking straight down on the model, on the 3D model, instead of looking at it from that top plan view using those plan versions of objects. I think the chairs are a good example of that, right? So this is what the chairs look like in top plan. Here's what the actual top looks like, okay? It's more of a 3D model of it. Front, we'll jump to the front, right? And it is saying this to me over and over again. I'm going to read this to you so that when it does this to you, you can just check the checkbox and have it not show it to you again. It says, did you know that you can change the default 3D view settings in the Vectorworks Preferences dialog? The 3D render mode and projection default are the settings located in the preferences. Great, cool, fine. Don't show this to me again. I'm good. Now I know, right? So there are defaults. Right now we're looking at this in wireframe, which is why it looks like a whole bunch of lines. But we'll get there in a second about what those different defaults do. So let's jump back into top plan, although you have the choice of like all of these various views. Okay, these are your default views. The next thing right here is the rotate plan tool. And we'll talk about this again when we get to a time when we might use it, but this basically allows you to just turn your whole sheet of paper. This is the multiple view panes, which is a button I don't care for, so I have gotten rid of it, hopefully for you. Or you can get rid of it over here and be like, don't really care about that, thanks, bye. Here is the perspective that you're looking at things in, which I don't use or change a whole lot, so maybe I'll get rid of that too. Projection, just in order to get more space into this view bar. So you notice as I remove tools, I can read more in the little drop downs, which is very helpful. This right here is the current render mode. And so I'll refer to this as the teapot because it has a little picture of a teapot on it. The render mode allows you to look at things in a bunch of different ways. Okay, we're going to use wireframe, these two hidden line versions, and OpenGL the most, but you can also do a final quality rendering in Vectorworks. It'll just take a long time depending on how slow your computer is, right? So when we're in wireframe, we're just seeing, and we're in the top view, I should switch to the top view, right? We're just sort of seeing the model as a 3D deal, right? I'm going to Shift C, tip it up, and look at it again, okay? When I switch to hidden line, now it's going to do a rendering and it's going to hide all of the lines that are in the background. There's a little progress bar down at the bottom. So now it's kind of like a line drawing, a 3D line drawing of the set, right? Every time I shift my position, it's going to re-render it. And you say, fine, go for it. And it'll take a second, process, and it'll re-render from this perspective, okay? It's going to take a second and do that. Great. So now I'm looking at it from over here. Okay. The other one that can be helpful is dashed hidden lines. So that will then create those dashed lines of things that are behind, like we did in our orthographic projections in drafting. So hold please while it processes all of this, and it'll do dashed lines for stuff that's behind the front lines. Yeah. Right. So now there's like solid lines for the front and then gray lines that are seen through, right? This is not a great example of that, but we can look at that more specifically when we start drafting three-dimensional objects. The one which is cool and fun is OpenGL. So OpenGL is like a quick render. So it really quickly applies all of the render textures, right? And it lets you move it around and it doesn't take a lot of time to render, okay? So this is what I'll use if I'm like showing a director or something. I'll be like, yeah, here's kind of what it looks like. And I've put all of these render textures on so you can see, you know, it has the floor rendering as the floor. It has some rough wood texture just thrown on all of the parts of the building. It has some some textures that are pictures of soft goods that I rented for the show. So that's all in the rendering texture. It's all embedded in this file. And OpenGL lets me see that real quick without going too crazy in terms of rendering. If I wanted to actually render it, then I could put it into Final Quality RenderWorks, and I'll have to wait while the teapot spins down here in the corner, and it'll create a more detailed rendering, right? You can kind of see it tracking around. Your computer may not be as fast as mine, and it may take absolutely ages to do this. So that is a thing to keep in mind, right? When you're in a render mode like this, you're going to have to wait for however long it takes to do that work, right? As you move around. So usually I'll only do a final quality rendering in a sheet layer through a viewport, and I'll update it when I know I have plenty of time to render and not get myself into a mess where I can't do anything because I'm waiting for that render to finish before I can move on to my next step. So the three we use: wireframe is a 3D view, right? It's like an X-ray. You can see through everything. Bunch of wires, right? Hidden line gives you dashed lines for things that are, or it hides lines that are behind, right? And then dashed hidden line will create dashed lines for things that are behind the front surfaces, okay? And it's going to take a second to do that. OpenGL is quick rendering, and then Final Quality RenderWorks is much more detailed rendering that's taking into account things like lighting and stuff like that. So that's what those tools are. Yeah, see, now you can see all of those dashed lines that are mostly confusing. The last one over here is data visualizations. We aren't going to use that a whole lot right away, but you can just leave it there for now. So that, and I'm going to just Command 5 my way back to my top plan view, is the rest of this top panel, right? So looking at different views, plan rotation, and then render modes. Okay, great. I hope that should be enough to get you started and to get you through this drafting package scavenger hunt. Let me know if you have questions, if there are things that you couldn't figure out how to do, or that I left out or did secretly. Then we will sort that out in our next video. All right, friends, thanks. Good luck. Bye.